Yes, folks, a 15-year-old New Zealand kid refuses to go to school and his parents can't do a damn thing about it. But this problem doesn't just apply to New Zealand, it pretty much applies to the entire Western world. So how did we get here? We simply cannot keep blaming the left when we all know the left will always keep pushing their cultural Marxist agenda. So the real problem lies with the gutless so-called centre-right parties that keep on trying to out-left the left. And a lot of this started with the David Camerons and the Malcolm Turnbulls and the John Keys of the so-called conservative right, none of whom were conservative. Now, folks, the following problem can be clearly laid at the feet of John Key, or at least most of it.
Commissioner is urging parents who can't convince their teenagers to go to school to seek help. It comes after the parents of a South Otago teenager were fined because their son stopped going to school. Keisha Brownlee reports.
It's lunchtime and
So the kid's smoking. So who's paying for those cigarettes? So there's obviously a parenting problem here as well.
15-year-old Jamie is not at school.
He just won't get out of bed to go to school.
He didn't want no education.
And his refusal to go has landed his parents with a trip to court and a $50 fine.
Oh, it wasn't good. First time we went out to court for that.
In one term last year, the then 14-year-old missed 38 days at South Otago High School.
Go and wake him up, but he just abused me. So I just leave him asleep. I can't force him out of bed because it'd be assault.
I can't force him out of bed because that would be assault, she says. So in other words, I can't smack him. I can't discipline him. Now, folks, that was caused by John Key with his anti-smacking bill.
If a student is away from school without good reason for 20 consecutive days, then they are automatically bumped off the school's roll. It then becomes a parent's duty to re-enrol them. Despite a warning from the Ministry of Education, Jamie wasn't re-enrolled, and that's what prompted their prosecution. It's rare. In 2015, there was one prosecution, 2 in 2017, and there's been 1 so far this year. The Children's Commissioner says it's a last resort.
Just about nothing is more important than meaningful attendance and participation in school.
In other words, there's nothing more important than meaningful left-wing indoctrination. Yeah, now folks, can you remember this march up Queen Street against John Key, who ignored 88% of New Zealanders who opposed the anti-smacking bill in a referendum? Democracy, not dictatorship. So folks, this was about 10 years ago. So we've been fighting this anti-democratic stuff for a long, long time now. Now, folks, my wife and I went to this march. We were part of this march. We were on the far side there somewhere, so you can't see us. But yes, it was a interesting time. Yeah, now, folks, have a listen to Mike Hosking take on John Key over this issue.
A prosecution, but that was ultimately withdrawn.
Yeah, but you're making parents criminals. That's what people get upset about.
Exactly.
I mean, you know, I don't happen to smack my kids, but I am a criminal if I do, and that's what's wrong with the law, and that's what 88% of people suggest to you.
Well, what I'm going to ensure is that's not the case, and what I would tell you is that's not the case at the moment. As I say, there were 33 cases where there were complaints about smacking. one that almost led to a prosecution, it was withdrawn. In the same time period, 83,000 complaints about domestic or family violence. So I think we need to put it in a bit of perspective. My view has been that the law isn't perfect, but we put in there a compromise and ensured that in practice it works. That's what's actually important here.
But John, this sounds like a complete muddle. The law's not perfect. Why not just toss it out? What's the big deal about it?
Well, because you'd have to go through an enormous process that would completely derail Parliament. It's not as simple as people say.
Derail Parliament?
Well, it would arguably be an extremely explosive issue going back the other way.
With who?
Well, with a whole lot of people.
Like who?
Well, like a lot of people.
Like who?
Well, like
you could pass it by lunchtime.
I don't think that's actually right.
Who would object to it?
Well, it's a free vote, isn't it? Potentially.
No, it's not.
Well,
it doesn't have to be.
Potentially it could be.
But it wouldn't be if you wanted to pass the law because you've got the numbers in the House. You could change this by lunchtime today.
Well, not by lunchtime today.
Okay, by 3 o'clock this afternoon. Come on.
The law could be changed. There's no...
So he said the law could be changed, but he didn't. He didn't change it. He completely ignored it. He completely ignored 88% of New Zealanders. Now have a listen to John Key on gay marriage.
Restrictions. There's restrictions on age. Yep. You and I are already married. We can't marry another person.
Yep.
You can't marry a relative. So, in effect, it's not actually about two adults who love each other, but isn't marriage actually more than that? The focus of marriage became on two loving adults, but the historical focus of marriage was actually on the children.
It was.
The right of children to be raised by a mum and a dad who created...
Exactly, yes.
...them committed to each other.
Yeah, and I think in the end, all of us probably just have to accept, that society's changing. I mean, what you're seeing now is a variety of different configurations of how people raise children and ultimately, whether they even get married or not. So marriage rates, I think, actually haven't been declining, but in fact, I think they've been slightly rising in recent times.
In number, but per head of population, they've been on a big drop. And I mean, does that concern you? I mean, is marriage something that we actually want to promote? Would the government? Well,
I think it's something to be highly valued. I mean, if you fundamentally just go away and look at the analysis and say, okay, where the family unit contains mum and dad, then there's no question that in terms of raising children, that's the best structure that we can find.
So if it's the best structure you can find, if the mum and dad is the best structure for raising family, why did you change it?
But the government doesn't say that, either.
No, and in the end, that's because we're forced to, I think, recognise in the modern world that configuration sometimes will look like people that are in a de facto relationship. They may at some point ultimately go on and get married. I mean, most people in that relationship probably at some point will, but not all of them do. We have some very good friends who have been together for an awfully long period of time, and for some reason they've got engaged and they've never got married. And they can't even necessarily explain that. It's obviously a step that they don't feel comfortable with. So, I mean, look, in the end, I mean, there's no doubt that because I voted for it as a Conservative MP,
as a Conservative MP, did you hear that, folks? He called himself a Conservative. No Conservative would vote for gay marriage. Yeah, now, folks, I'm going to play Maurice Williamson's gay rainbow speech because he typifies everything that's wrong with the National Party.
Speaker, I too will be taking a split call with my colleague Jamie Lee Ross, as sort of the young and the vibrant versus the old and the boring. And sir, and members of the House will be forced to choose which one is which, sir. Sir, I want to first of all congratulate Louisa Wall for this bill. And I want to say, sir, that the good news about the years in this Parliament is you learn to deflect all of the dreadful sort of fire and brimstone accusations that are going to happen, sir. I've had a reverend in my local electorate call, the gay onslaught will start the day after this bill is passed.
And it has. It has. It started straight away after that bill was passed. Gays are now the biggest bullies out. They're bullying everyone into transgender nonsense, into all sorts of nonsense.
Sir, we're really struggling to know what the gay onslaught will look like. We don't know if it'll come down the Pakuranga Highway as a series of troops.
Oh, he's so good at telling jokes, isn't he?
Or whether it'll be a gas that flows in over the electorate and locks us all in. I also, sir, had a Catholic priest tell me that I was supporting an unnatural act. I found that quite interesting coming from someone who's taken an oath of celibacy for his whole life. I always say celibacy. Okay, we'll go with celibacy. Okay, I haven't done it, so I don't know what it's about. I also had a letter telling me I would burn in the fires of hell for eternity, and that was a bad mistake because I've got a degree in physics. I used the thermodynamic laws of physics. I put in my body weight and my humidity and so on. I assumed the furnace to be at 5,000 degrees, and I will last for just on 2.1 seconds. It's hardly eternity. What do you think? And some more disgusting claims about what adoption would be. Well, sir, I've got 3 fantastic adopted kids. I know how good adoption is, and I found some of it just...
Yeah, now you tell the same to kids, adopted kids with homosexual parents. You disgusting idiot.
disgraceful. I found some of the bullying tactics really evil. And, sir, I gave up being scared of bullies when I was at primary school. However, a huge amount of the opposition was from moderates, from people who were concerned, who were seriously worried what this might do to the fabric of our society. I respect their concern. I respect their worry. They were worried about what it might do to their families and so on. Let me repeat to them now, sir. All we are doing with this bill is allowing 2 people who love each other to have that love recognised by way of marriage. That is all we are doing. We are not declaring nuclear war on a foreign state. We are not bringing a virus in that could wipe out our agriculture sector forever. We are allowing 2 people who love each other to have that recognised. And I can't see what's wrong with that for love nor money, sir. I just cannot. I cannot understand why someone would be opposed. I understand why people don't like what it is that others do. That's fine. We're all in that category. But I give a promise to those people who are opposed to this bill right now. I give you a watertight, guaranteed promise. The sun will still rise tomorrow. Your teenage daughter will still argue back with you as if she knows everything. Your mortgage will not grow. You will not have skin diseases or rashes or toads in your bed, sir. The world will just carry on. So don't make this into a big deal. This is fantastic for the people it affects, but for the rest of us, life will go on. And finally, can I say, sir, one of the messages I had was that this bill was the cause of our drought. This bill was the cause of our drought. Well, if any of you follow my Twitter account, you will see that in the Pakuranga electorate this morning, it was pouring with rain. We have the most enormous big gay rainbow across my electorate.
Yeah, funny, wasn't he, folks? Thank Christ he's gone. But in reality, folks, the National Party is full of people like him. And folks, we'll never get back to democracy until we can see a clear difference between the left and the right.